And we are just about live, probably live right now, but it takes a minute. It always tells me after, which is super helpful.
Right.
And we're live. Awesome. Well, welcome everybody who's watching this, most likely from your home office. Or from an iPhone or a mobile device somewhere. I appreciate you guys being here. I am here interviewing Brad Long for our next interview on the Growth Secrets interview series. Brad is the Zero Debt Coach. That's his website and that's his moniker. I'm going to let him do his full intro, but I asked Brad to talk to me today specifically because we are dealing with, obviously, we're dealing with a very difficult economic time. And given Brad's focus on personal finance, I really wanted to have this conversation this week because I know a lot of people have questions. A lot of people are concerned what they're going to do and how they're going to manage this process. And so I really appreciate you for being on today, Brad.
Well, thanks for having me, Reed, and hi, everybody. And yeah, just a brief introduction. I'm Brad Long, like you said, Zero Debt Coach, and I successfully paid off $43,000 worth of consumer debt a little over a decade ago and really got into financial coaching as a result of that. And basically on our platform, what we do is we help people manage financial crises like the one that we're in now by organizing their finances, getting on a written budget, and then ultimately, once we've gotten those things together, it's much easier for them to continue that through that process to eliminate their debt and then move on to financial independence. So that's probably way ahead of where we are with a lot of the audience right now. But where we start normally is the financial crisis.
Gotcha. So, and I like the way you have this put on your website. You released a new, I think you called it like the ultimate guide to navigating the financial crisis. But you say that we deal with this from the principles standpoint, the same way we deal with any financial crisis, which a financial crisis doesn't always mean nationwide or market wide. It can be your own financial crisis. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially what you're doing is, and this probably might seem a little bit oversimplified for a lot of people, but there are basically three pillars of financial survival. So preserve capital, which is your economic defense. And that's where you're going to go through and list out all of your debts, all of your expenses, get those into a written budget of some kind. And there you're going to be able to see like, okay, can I pay all my bills? Can I not pay all my bills? And then if you can't pay all your bills, we want to do something called the four walls, which is, we'll go into a little bit of that. But so you've got pillar number one is preserve capital. Pillar number two is aggressively obtain capital. And that's going to be, extra work, side hustles, selling some stuff. And then the third pillar is to make sure that you're getting help, encouragement, and community. Because as we've seen, in this crisis, I mean, it's really taken us all somewhat to one degree or another by surprise. So, in that sense, it's really important. And I think a little bit easier right now because we're all sort of in this together kind of thing to get that community and to get that help that you need.
Yeah, that is, I think, something that we are adapting to in real time, right? That community thing, which it's been neat to see, right? Like I get together with a group of guys for a Bible study once a week, and we did it via Zoom this morning. We're all about 15 minutes away from each other. It's not like this is a group that's really far apart. And obviously I'm spending all day, every day inside of Zoom, conducting client meetings and all that kind of stuff. But that just having that community of people around you it's really become a challenge. I'm thankful we have these tools. I asked somebody the other day, imagine if this happened in like 1988, right? And you were really, truly isolated and couldn't work. I mean, I don't know how we'd manage. I think people would go crazy before they got sick.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you talked about something that I want to hone in on. You talked about that financial defense, right? And putting up those walls. what do you advise people to do, practically speaking, when, let's say right now, and I think even if you haven't lost your job, you're probably being more conservative today than you were a month and a half ago, financially speaking. What are you advising people to do? Can you walk us through that?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So even with a lot of our student population that were in the debt elimination process, so they've gotten on a written budget, they've organized their finances, they've got their $1,000 emergency fund or some semblance of that, and they're working through the debt snowball. I'm a Dave Ramsey coach, so I kind of work with that model. What we're telling everyone right now is, regardless of where you are in that process, to press pause on your debt elimination process right now. If you can, if you're still working, if you can still make the minimum payments on your debt load, then go ahead and keep doing that. But what we want to see you do is, just buttress your emergency fund. Get 3 to 6 months worth of expenses setting aside in an emergency fund, even up to a year, because we just don't know how long this is going to last. And we've already seen just incredible carnage in terms of unemployment claims. And when you look at that through the lens of the reality that 78% of the population lives paycheck to paycheck, there's a lot of really bad stuff going on out there right now. So a lot of the conversations that we're having with people right now is to say, okay, even if you are in the debt elimination process, go ahead and press pause on that. And if you're still working, make the minimum payments. If you're not working, then that's where we go to the 4 walls. Okay. And so the 4 walls is just this defensive perimeter that you draw around your finances, which is where it's your home, it's food, it's transportation, and it's clothing. And so your home is going to be your mortgage, your rent, your utilities. Food is obviously going to be not restaurants, not takeout. You're really in defensive mode here. Transportation is going to be whatever you need to do to make sure that you can pay your car payment if you've got one of those, your gasoline, insurance. And then clothing is not really, at least here in North America, it doesn't seem to be an issue with most of our students. But yeah, you just want to kind of, pare everything down and just focus on those 4 things so that we can make sure that those are covered and then start saving for the emergency fund piece.
Gotcha. Well, and especially when it comes to clothing, you can save money on pants because Zoom only gets from about here up. So.
Yeah, I'm not gonna confirm or deny whether I'm wearing pants right now. So I'll just leave that to the
I keep seeing all these shots of people, on Instagram and stuff, of like suit and tie up here, workout shorts down here. I may or may not be wearing a pair of running shorts with a button down over it. And you know what? I'm not embarrassed at all. And I'll tell you this secret. For those of us that have been working from home for a long time, joke's on you guys. We've been doing this for years.
That's right. Yeah. Even in my corporate days, I would show up to Zoom meetings and something like this or a little fancier, and then, anything goes.
Yeah. Well, so I appreciate you walking us through that. So the next pillar you talked about is would you call it aggressively acquiring capital?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so what are some of the things that, and this is a challenge right now, I would imagine, like, what are you advising people to do in this, where you can't just go out and do the garage sale flips like Gary Vaynerchuk talks about right now? What are people able to do right now to make a little bit extra money?
Yeah. And this particular piece it kind of straddles, offense and defense. So one of the first things that we advise our students is, hey, look, go through your basement, go through your attic, go through your closets. If you've got an external storage unit, go through that as well. This is a time to start offloading stuff that's not used. If you haven't used it in a year, maybe it's on the chopping block. Maybe it's time to monetize your decluttering process. We've got all this time on our hands, and so we can kind of go through our stuff. And so why not, monetize that? So that's really kind of the first thing, is like, what can I sell? Go to Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist. We've even sold stuff on eBay and Amazon even. So that's one thing. The other thing is if you need immediate work, there's a free guide that I'll leave a link for you for your audience. It has a link to the National Retail Federation's website. And there are tons of retailers that are hiring right now, a lot of grocers, a lot of, like Walmarts and Targets and things like that, because of the incredible influx in new demand. So there are a lot of companies that are hiring. Now, it may not be something that you want to do, and I get that. I mean, this is, extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. But if we're talking about, keeping your four walls intact and buttressing that emergency fund, we want to do whatever we can to make sure that we've got cash flow coming in, selling stuff, getting extra work. And then the other piece that I, always talk about, and I think is particularly relevant to your audience, is, developing some kind of side hustle. Now, there are a lot of different side hustles. Some of them are probably not relevant right now. Like you can't really drive for Uber or Lyft, as far as I know. And there are going to be some limitations on those. But going online and starting something, it's not going to make you $100,000 in the next couple of weeks. It's maybe not even in the next couple of years, but it's a great time to start getting online. And if you've got particularly something that you can teach, to start developing an audience and serving an audience. But going back to what you're saying, in an immediate sense, in an emergency sense, it's, sell stuff. If you've got a second car, in the family, and you can do without two cars, I mean, depending on what your posture is, if you're in, massive need right now, it might be time to sell that car. It's just time to start offloading stuff because we just don't know how long this is going to last.
Well, and then the flip side of that is I've seen a lot of people, and not dishonestly doing this, but very in an above board way, seeing that there are great deals to be had. So believe it or not, you can find buyers for those types of things because people with cash are looking to make That's some right. make some deals. Right, it's a good time for that. Well, let's shift focus a little bit. Presumably, you're still pushing your business forward. You're still marketing. You're still selling. It's an uncomfortable time right now to do that, admittedly, and that's my whole business, right? And I'm having to, in every situation, I'm having to be very, very sensitive in how I'm doing that. What are you doing right now to keep your pipeline full, keep business going forward in a way that is cognizant of what's going on, but still aggressively growing?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think that that's something that, every entrepreneur is dealing with right now, is just that fear of almost like imposter syndrome. I don't want to be a disaster capitalist. I don't want to be out in people's faces trying to sell them stuff. So the posture that we're taking really is just to serve. We and I think you agree, and your audience probably agrees with this perspective a lot, that selling is not necessarily a bad thing. If you're selling something, you're just exchanging value. Okay. And so what the value is right now in the marketplace is this great need, particularly vis-a-vis what we do, for information, for, okay, so you're saying do the defense thing, do the offense thing, and get in community. Like, how do I do that? And so there's value in breaking down those steps and reducing the overwhelm. So I think that any entrepreneur in any business, if they have the heart of, serving, really truly serving their audience right now, being present, I think that's really the biggest thing right now. And I'm glad to, be doing this Facebook Live with you, because it's something that I'm getting ready to start doing myself. So it's kind of knocking the rust off a little bit. But, what they need right now is your presence, your encouragement. And, obviously there are going to be people. Not everyone, you alluded to this a second ago, not everyone is in this posture of incredible need right now. There are people that have prepared for situations like this. And this is, certainly what we try to do with our students: prepare for a global recession, where they look at things going on sale and they're going to be in the marketplace for buying things, so it's really easy to get tunnel vision and just make the assumption that everybody's hurting right now, and that it's bad to sell and you're dirty if you sell. No, that's not true at all. Selling is just an exchange of value. And if your audience has a need and they have the funds to do that, they're going to exchange that value with you. And so I think that this is especially a really important time to be online, to be present with your audience, to build trust. This is a time for you to really build your brand and build your presence with the people that are following you or that are just discovering you.
Okay, so I completely agree with this. One, I think as long as the product or service that you're selling is genuinely valuable, to sell is to do a very honorable thing. If you were not providing a ton of value, then you are going to be on the chopping block. So hopefully this isn't the first time that you're being confronted with the fact that your product or service should be vital and a must-have for your customers. But if it's not, you're going to need to know. I talked about this, I think last night I did this. You're going to need to, number one, make sure you are speaking to your customers and talking to your client list and making sure that you're there providing the value and giving them the information and helping them through the situation as best you can. And you got to be able to get your message out in front of people that can become your customers, because they're looking for these answers, right? That's one of the reasons I brought Brad on today, is because I knew he had the answers that we needed during this time. And he's made that clear because of the effort and the work that he's put into building his brand and creating helpful, valuable content. So I applaud you for that, Brad. And so I then kind of want to pivot a little bit back to the personal finance side of things. Well, I guess to the business finance thing. What information or what knowledge do you have about these government programs, and what are you advising to people? And this is a tough question, because this is it debt? Is it not debt, right? Where does the Dave Ramsey part of you say no under any circumstances? And then the business guy in you look at this creatively. I'm so curious to see your thoughts on this, and maybe you have some information about the programs, or maybe you just have opinions. Either way, I'd love to get your insight on it.
No, that's great. And I think the answer is for everybody is that there are no real clear answers right now. I mean, we hear the rumblings of the $1,200 stimulus, and I've actually looked through some of the details on that, and it's a bit of a nightmare, to be honest with you, because they've made it so complicated. And so certainly there are people in our audience and in your audience that, they need that, they need those funds, they need that money. But it's just it's really just anyone's guess as to if or when it will actually come. I mean, I was looking at, some of the details talk about, they're releasing checks based on your income, and the lower your income, the sooner you get a check. But like the higher your income, if you're at the upper end of the spectrum, you might not see a check for a few months. And so what this does, and it may not be helpful in an immediate sense, but what this does with our message and with our audience, and hopefully with yours too, is as a culture, we've got to stop living beyond our means. We've got to use this crisis as a wake-up call to get our finances organized, get on a budget, start eliminating debt, stop over consuming. This is a huge wake-up call. Now, I shared at the very beginning that I paid off $43,000 worth of consumer debt a little over a decade ago. There was a snapshot moment in my life where I was completely terrified. It wasn't a financial crisis like this, but that was the seed of my why, And so I think that, and my hope with this situation is that this situation, if you've been laid bare by it, if you are in the place where you're really scared about what's going on, totally understand, totally empathize with you there, and definitely want to help equip you with the ladder to climb out of the hole. But I want, even more than anything, to let this moment in time be your why, to get your arms around this stuff. Because if you can start now, and you can do some of these things while you're waiting on our inept government to do what it is that they say they're going to do, whatever that means, and nobody knows, whether it's the consumer side or the business side of stuff, it's all changing almost on a daily basis. Use this opportunity to get your arms around your current situation. And then once we've, gotten you organized, gotten you on a budget, and started buttressing that emergency fund, let's say you save 6 months worth of an emergency fund and the dust settles and the smoke clears, and 3 months from now, things go more back to normal, you can take half of that emergency fund and throw it at debt, and you've already gotten major traction in the right direction. But I'm just hoping in an overarching sense, and I hope this is, answering the question. I'm just hoping in an overarching sense that for our culture, that this is a giant wake up call to stop this hyper consumption, to stop buying into this debt illusion that, 78% of the population lives paycheck to paycheck. And the statistics for covering a $400 or $1,000 emergency are just staggering. And so I'm just hopeful that this is a giant wake up call. And certainly, we have the tools, not just us, but tons of financial coaches, Dave Ramsey, like whoever it is that you're following, get on a plan. Let this be the last time. Let this be your why, your defining moment.
Look, I completely agree. And I mean, I felt this to a certain degree myself, right? I had said for years that when the next '08 happens, right? When the next recession happens, I want to be a buyer, right? I want to be able to take advantage of the things that go on sale, right? And I even pushed that out further in my mind than it actually happened, right? So I'm not in as much of a position to be able to capitalize as I wanted to be. And it was because of the same reason. I mean, I'm certainly guilty of that, of saying, well, things are so good right now. I don't know how long it's going to be before that happens. And you start to think about other things to do with that money, right? That extra money, when times are flush, it's really difficult. And I went back to a basic principle that my grandfather used to say, it's been said a bunch by, or it's been repeated a bunch by people who are quoting falsely or correctly, I'm not sure, Warren Buffett, who said, be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful, right? And I don't want to uplift the word greed, but what the point of that is that when you look around and you see that everybody is living, what's the phrase, high on the hog, right? And everybody's thinking about getting a bigger house and a nicer car, and the stock market is going up, and everyone's talking about the returns they're getting in their portfolio. That's the time to say we need to start being conservative, and we need to start, for lack of a better way to put it, we need to start stocking away some cash. And then when people are scared, then people can take there's an opportunity there. And I've been trying to talk about the opportunity in this crisis as much as possible, just to make sure that there's a positive enough viewpoint available for it.
I wanted to add a couple of things to what you're saying, and I completely agree. And I understand, and I think your audience probably understands what you're saying by, kind of reframing the word greed. It's just opportunity. And so, like I was saying before, a crisis like this is not a crisis for everyone. There are people out there, those of us that have prepared for something like this, that are looking for buyer's opportunities. And our heart is to get as many people to that place as possible. So I had basically two awakenings. I had my first awakening in 2004 when I found myself in $43,000 worth of consumer debt. That's when I discovered Dave Ramsey. 2.5 years later, I followed that stuff, religiously, and I was completely out of debt. My second awakening was 2008. And that was my awakening to the financial system, the monetary system, governance and monetary policy. And I really started to understand how the plumbing of our system works. And I think that that's another thing. I don't want to overwhelm anyone, but I think that once you get to this place where you've gotten your arms around your personal situation and maybe your business situation, that there are tons of great resources to help educate you as to how this works in these debt bubbles, and these financial cycles are really natural. And a lot of what the monetary policy has just blown up many of these bubbles. And so it's really just a matter of time before something like this happens again. And to what you were saying, Reed, it's, you can be prepared to be in a position of strength when that happens the next time.
Yeah, I don't even know that I would, if I could go back in time and when I started to really learn about how the government works and the difference between monetary and fiscal policy and how the Federal Reserve works, I may have told myself, save yourself the heartache and don't learn it. Just stay ignorant. But no, all jokes aside, it's really important to understand how that kind of how those things affect everyday life. It'll frustrate you for sure, but you need to be aware. We're adults, right?
Yep.
We need to be accountable. We need to be responsible for our situation and for our family. I saw a quote. It was on a bumper sticker, and I think it was probably like a Navy SEAL bumper sticker, and it said, and forgive me if someone is in the military and I got the wrong arm of the military, but it said, no one's coming to help. You're on your own.
That's right.
And or it's up to us was the phrase. It's up to you.
Yep.
And even though we do want to be a community, right, that helps each other and that works with each other, it's not a bad policy to have that I need to take responsibility for my situation and my family situation. No one's going to show up at the door to bail me out.
That's right. And that's something that in the normal course of our coaching practice, when we're dealing with people that are in an individual crisis situation, maybe they're looking at bankruptcy. And so we're going through this process of figuring out, what they owe and, getting their budget together. One of the things that is a big part of this financial coaching process is retraining the way that we think about money. And one of the main things, and we even have this in our visual for the 4 walls, is that your creditors, government, banks, they don't give a rip about you. They have these marketing messages of we're here to serve and we're here to do this. No, they don't give a rip about you. The financial system doesn't give a rip about you. So I just really want to buttress what you're saying, that it is a very individual thing. And so you have to take responsibility for yourself, for your family, for your business, and get this stuff in order. Because the way that I train my students is that personal finance, business finance is kind of like warfare. People are always going to be trying to get into your pockets. And so you have to be the one that is in charge of your numbers, in charge of your processes, so that you know when to say yes and when to say no, and eschew debt. Just try to get out of debt, never look at it again. I mean, that's why I'm zero debt coach. I hate debt. I hate everything about it. I hate the mess that it made of my life. And I, have made it a mission to reduce as much as I can, as much as our practice can, that 78% of the population that lives paycheck to paycheck and has crippling levels of debt. So one more thing that I wanted to mention earlier around your, talking, just kind of coaching your audience right now through this whole marketing thing. One of the things that we're trying to do also in this process is we're doing stuff that's not scalable. Because there's such an influx of attention and eyeballs on our content, that's particularly rated to crisis survival, we're offering basically a 30-minute, free Zoom coaching session to anybody that reaches out to us to listen to their situation and maybe get them pointed in the direction of some resources that will help them immediately. That's not something that will scale. We'll have to probably, stop doing that at some point. But there are things like that during this particular first couple of months of this, as people are kind of getting the bad news of being furloughed or laid off or terminated, we're trying to offer that comfort and just get them to the information and the community that they need.
That's really great. So guys, I'll make sure we have a link to where you can book some time with Brad. Mm-hmm. Brad's a fellow Calendly user. I did a video about the tools that I've used that have helped me survive working remotely for a few years now, and Calendly is one of them. So I imagine that's where we'll be directing people to book some time to talk to you. That's great tool, guys. If you aren't using it, it'll save your remote work. I mean,
your sanity. I remember just going back and forth in emails with people. It just saves so much administrative work. I don't know what I would do without it.
I don't do the back and forth. I'm like, no, here's my link.
Yep.
If it's available, I'm available. Right.
That's right. That's right.
Grab it. So
that's right.
Well, hey, I wanted to ask you a quick question. This came in from one of the viewers here, Courtney, who may or may not be my little sister. She said, speaking of savings, right? We mentioned instead of focusing on really hacking away at debt for now, put some money aside during this period in case things get worse or in case your income situation changes. she just asked, what's the best place to put that? Just a traditional savings account, or do you have a recommendation? Are there higher interest rate savings accounts? I know last year there were some really good opportunities in that space. I don't know if those still exist anymore. What are you advising people to do?
Yeah. So generally speaking, great question, Courtney. Thank you for asking. So generally speaking, we tell people with their emergency fund, you want to keep it far enough away that you don't have immediate access to it so that you go buy an Xbox or a new purse, but close enough that you can grab it in an emergency, or if you need to fund your checking account for, something that has come up as an emergency. So generally speaking, a traditional savings account is fine. I was using Wealthfront up until very recently. And this gets into some of the larger machinations of the financial system. The Fed has dropped the interest rates. And so, I was getting 2.5% interest on that a few months ago, and then it's steadily gone down to like 0.25 or something like that. So I think that right now, probably, you do want to have a little bit of cash on hand. I don't want to be a doomsday guy, but there are, scenarios where if this gets too crazy, they could do a bank holiday and you may not have access to your funds. So I would definitely, this is probably a little bit non-traditional for a lot of people, have a little bit of physical cash on hand. But then generally speaking, yeah, a savings account is one of those instruments that it's just far enough away that you're not going to spend, you're not going to buy a purse or an Xbox, and just close enough that you can funnel that into your checking account or into cash if you need it for an emergency.
So two interesting things there. So as soon as all this stuff really hit the fan, because I didn't know how people were going to react, if there was going to be some unrest, one of the first things we did was we got a hold of some physical cash just in case, right? I think that's smart to have some on hand. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Yep. And then I had a recommendation, or at least an experiential recommendation that we use. So in addition to traditional savings accounts, we use an app called Digit. Are you familiar with Digit?
No, I'm not familiar with that one.
So it's pretty neat, guys. If you're watching this, I'll leave a link to it where I think you can get like $5 by signing up with a link. But it will monitor your spending. It's connected to your bank account. It'll monitor your spending, and it will take tiny chunks that it expects that you won't miss. I mean, I'll see $2 were taken out here, and then a couple days later it's like $4 is taken out here, and it puts it over into a savings account that's separate from your savings accounts that you've got set up. And the thing that I really appreciate about it, in addition to that, is number one, we'll look up and we'll say, wow, we've saved $500 in the last 3 months, and I didn't even think about it. And that's in addition to our usual savings. But the thing that I like about it is that in order to get money from it, I have to go through the process of texting, through this chat bot and tell it an exact amount. And I think they built this in there to the AI for like the psychological function or part of it. It asks you, it just says, for our memo, what do you plan to use this for? Right. And so like you don't have to answer that, but like the process of like, do I really need this? Like, I'm about to admit openly that I'm going to use this for a non-emergency purpose, right? And it just like makes you think twice. Yeah. And it's one step removed from just being able to pull out another card and swipe it or something. So it puts it at arm's length. Obviously, yes, we can get it if we need it, but it puts it at arm's length. To be honest, it's usually what we use for Christmas budget, right? We just let it compile or pile up throughout the year, and then that's what we pull away for a Christmas budget. But that's a neat tool, Courtney. You may want to check that out. And guys, I'll put a link in there if you want to look into that. But I like that advice of at least keeping it one step removed from being able to spend it on an Xbox.
That's right.
Well, all right, Brad, this has been super helpful. I really appreciate you coming on kind of last minute. I know that we had plans to do this at a different time, and so I appreciate you making time to talk about this. I know a lot of people have had questions and are just frankly not sure what to do these days. Yeah. And so before we go, though, I was going to ask, what are the best places that people can learn more about you, and how can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to share my screen real quick. This is our financial crisis survival guide, and I'll share the link to that blog post, but you can download this as a PDF. That's really what a lot of people are finding super helpful right now in terms of, crisis financial planning. But you can reach me at brad@zerodebtcoach.com. That's ZERO debtcoach.com, or, www.zerodebtcoach.com. And again, obviously for your audience, we're more than happy to, schedule a 30-minute Zoom call to just kind of troubleshoot your situation and see, what can be done immediately to help you navigate this ridiculous, unexpected global nightmare that we're all in the middle of. So
guys, take advantage of that. I'm telling you, one of the first things that I did was I started asking people that I trusted that had expertise in this area. Reached out to Brad, reached out to my CPA, wanted to get some knowledge. This is a time in your life, not just your financial life, where having access to knowledge and trustworthy people is it's an informational advantage that you can have right now. So take advantage of that. I'm also going to leave, I just dropped a link to zerodebtcoach.com in the comments. And guys, if you're watching this, I'd ask you to do two things. If you're watching this live right now, or if you're watching it live, just drop a comment that says live. And if you're watching later on the replay, just drop a comment that says replay. Helps us understand when the best time is to post these videos. But Brad, I really appreciate you taking the time today. Again, we'll sign
pleasure.
off now, but hopefully you and I will have plenty of time to chat in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Reed. Take care, everybody. Be safe out there.
Bye, folks.